Good morning, everyone, and welcome, and thanks for coming out on this another, well, a little chillier day. But we continue on with our story of, actually today's Reformation Sunday, so it's going to be a history day for you, both here and there. But welcome to 1946. The war is over, and the church is beginning to address the issues that have arisen from the war. Not just the economic issues and the culture, but also the spiritual issues. And we talked last week about the first issue, and that was that first Sunday back in church, the Reconciliation Sunday, we'll call it, when those who fought and those who stayed home and those who chose to not and ended up in camps and so on had to reconcile and make the church work. Of course, the question is, what kind of church would be born of that? And we saw the church flourished in the years to come. And we'll talk about some of those statistics in the days to come, or in the Sundays to come. But this post-war church, the Christians faced a very, very different world. And they had to ask themselves the question, or answer the question, is it business as before or business as usual, or is it a brave new world? Now, for those of you who are a bit of history buffs, tell me some of the technological differences between the 1940s and the 1950s. What changed? What are some of the big changes? Yeah, technology.
Well, like computers.
Yeah, the computer was invented during World War II. Yeah. Yeah, it was huge. It was the size of a house, but...
Jet engines.
Jet engines, exactly. Jet propulsion changed the world.
Yeah.
In Saskatchewan, it would have been rural electrification.
Exactly. Electricity came to rural places. Yeah. And with that came the advent of radio and ultimately television. Yeah, mass communication. Good.
What about guns?
Yeah, oh yeah, materials, technology, yeah. The single bolt action rifle, if Loudon boys were here, they would tell you about the invention of the assault rifle, and how that changed. Yeah, what year, what model, and how to pronounce it. Yeah. Good. There's one that had a massive cultural change and produced a question that no one was prepared to ask. Matter of fact, a question no one had ever asked up to that point from a moral foundation that we're actually not talking about, which is the center of our conversation this morning. So that's good. It means you haven't thought about it. And that was the atomic bomb. And we sometimes think of this merely as a political issue or a military issue, but it became a massive moral issue for the church. How do you live in a world where the good people of the world have the power to destroy not just the armies of the world, but the civilian populations of the world, and vice versa, the bad guys have the physical power to wipe out the good guys? And we get the Red Scare. And those of you who grew up in the 50s might remember Duck and Cover, those images, and living under the threat of atomic annihilation was a reality that we don't even think about anymore. We've lived under this umbrella for so long. And when was the last time you were worried about the threat of atomic annihilation? In your lifetime? Maybe, but not in the last 30 years. Right? We live under the long peace. And so, in the late 40s, the Christian churches began to debate this issue. And in 1948, the World Council of Churches proclaimed nuclear weapons are a sin against God and the degradation of man. So that atomic weapons were considered sin, to even own them. Now, not everyone thought that way. Jordy.
Having created and amassed murderously destructive weapons such as the atomic bomb, mankind arrogated unto himself divine prerogatives for the destruction of human civilization as a result of nuclear war would be tantamount to the death of the world, since we have no reliable knowledge of the existence of intelligent life elsewhere in the universe. The question could be raised, is a man who is sinful by nature capable of rationally handling something that has superhuman potential?
So Alexei Obunkov, who's a Soviet designer of atomic weapons, asked the great moral questions. We who are sinful by nature, are we capable of handling something that is beyond human realms? That on a Sunday afternoon, a president or a premier could issue orders and destroy hundreds of millions of people with no military necessity. Lily, up for reading this morning?
Sure. I think. Is the atom bomb something good or something evil? Should we celebrate its invention or should we mourn? Is it possible to form an unequivocal judgment on this matter? Perhaps it was the prayers of Father Seraphim that helped create the weapons that stood guard over Russia, and for the well-being of which Saint Seraphim prayed by the stone in the Seraph.
So we'll get to the prayer of Saint Seraphim, but are these weapons a gift from God? Jack, if you wouldn't mind.
The necessity of using the threat of atomic destruction as an instrument for the preservation of peace is a tragic element of our contemporary situation. Tragedy elicits admiration as well as pity because it combines nobility with guilt.
So the noble weapon that would save us from our enemies also makes us terribly guilty for the destruction of our enemies. Neighbor says the irony of this weapon is that it's good because it saves us from the threat of communism, or it's evil because it's a moral evil. We, I think for the most part, don't question the moral evil of war. Some do, obviously. We're not Mennonites. If Sherry and Kevin were here, this would be a very different discussion because Mennonites are conscientious objector that war in itself is a moral evil. Many of us would see that there is a place and there's a balance. We have to decide that. Each one of you will have to decide that yourself, and I won't ask you to this morning. But I am going to ask you to make some big decisions. So, welcome. This morning, welcome to 1948. The time machine just closed the door. Click. It is now 1948. You have been selected by President Truman. You are now the President's Religious Citizens Advisory Council. And I am acting on behalf of President Truman this morning. I'm going to inform you of current decisions that President Truman must make. And you, as the Religious Citizens Advisory Council, Special Religious Citizens Advisory Council of the President, are going to vote on issues upon which President Truman will now enact. You control the fate of the world in this room this morning. So you have ballots in front of you. I'm going to lay out the details, and you are going to vote. And then based on your decision, the President will act. Get your ethical compass warmed up.
How many people were on this one?
I made this up.
I don't think it was real.
No, so it sounds like something real. I tried to make it sound legitimate.
You were hoping nobody would ask.
Yeah, exactly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 15. All right. First issue to the President. Oh, by the way, this is President Truman, who was a former haberdasherist. He was an artillery captain during World War I, and he has been given the keys to the atomic bomb. All right, issue number 1, ladies and gentlemen, is 1948. We have a problem, and that is the Berlin Blockade. Let me introduce you to it. Here's what the President says. As you know, Germany has been divided into the following segments. The Americans, we control the yellow areas. The British control the purple. The French control the orange. And the Soviets control the green, and plus the green borders around here. Berlin itself has been divided up into the same way. If you look where Berlin is, it is in the heart of the Soviet zone. Berlin itself has been divided up into the Soviet sector, the French sector, the British sector, and our sector, the American sector. Currently, as of today, which we're in the middle of June right now, there are 2.8 million people living in Berlin. And their lives are not easy. While some have recovered from the consequences of the war only 3 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, much of the city still lies in ruins. Food issues continue to be a problem. There are bread lines, food lines, and work lines. There is still poverty in Berlin as they try and rebuild the ruins as a result of the Soviet destruction and our aerial bombardment of Berlin itself. Much of the population is currently suffering. The military situation is this, that the Soviets control the areas in dark gray. We and our allies control the areas in white. As you can see, things aren't well. The military situation is not good from our perspective. Currently, our entire armed forces, after demobilization of the war, we have 391,000 men under arms worldwide. Britain has 488,000. In Europe alone right now, we have 400 aircraft in Europe. The Soviets, on the other hand, have 5.5 million men under arms and 2.8 million men actively engaged in military army. There are 500,000 men in Eastern Europe right now. They have 35,000 tanks, Germany alone, there are 6,000 tanks in Germany. They have 19,000 aircraft to our 400. And they have, in addition to that, they have 800,000 Allied troops with an additional 2,900 aircraft. We are outnumbered maybe 15 to 1. A concern. Now, on the plus side, we have, as of 1948, 50 atomic bombs. We are hoping by next year to have 200, and the Soviets have 0. So we have a strategic advantage. This brings you in. Here is the current situation of the crisis. Comrade Christian, if you want to read the June 24th one.
June 24, 1948, the Soviets have blocked all road, railway, and canal access to the Allied occupied zone of Berlin, announcing that the fourth administration of the city has come to an end.
The Soviets have created a blockade. Food, fuel, coal, everything, medical supplies are no longer going into our sectors, the British, the French, or the American sector. And the people, it's June, but winter's coming. Keep going, Christian.
The Soviets have cut some 2.5 million civilians in the three western sectors of Berlin from access to electricity as well as food, coal, and other crucial supplies.
So we are responsible for the well-being of 2.5 million Berliners, but they are about to enter a very dire situation because of the blockade. All right, ongoing. Bonnie.
The Central Intelligence Agency estimated that war is not probable within 60 days, but will make no predictions beyond that.
So we have a 60-day window to act. Otherwise, we predict there will be full outblown war within 60 days.
Secretary of Defense James Forrestal had devoted all his energy to preparing a plan for atomic war with the Soviets.
So James Forrestal has prepared for us a plan how to use our atomic weapons against the Soviets in this setting. So we have a plan.
On March 5th, General Clay sent a cable on the possible imminence of war.
We are on the brink.
On March 17th, President Harry S. Truman has asked Congress for reimposition of selective service and prompt enactment of a universal military training.
Because we demobilized our troops, we are in dire straits. So the president, as of March, remember we're now in mid-June, has enacted the war, not the War Measures Act, but he wants to get our troops back in line. And we have lots of boys willing to go back.
And that was in 48?
48. So you have a ballot in front of you. You make the decision. Should we, A, give in to the Soviets and let the people of Berlin freeze and starve? Should we, B, use conventional means, and you know our limitations, and you know what they have, the Allied army in Germany, to break through? We'll send through armored columns to break through and supply food and water and coal. Or should we, C, you could pick which one you want, use atomic weapons to destroy? Remember, we've got 5 bombs to destroy how many Russian cities, forcing the USSR to lift the blockade, or you know that they have X million troops. How many frontline troops should we destroy? All right, take a moment and vote. We'll do the outcome in a minute. So grab your pencil and vote. Your decision will determine the outcome.
Can I use the 60-day thing?
You can use anything you want, whatever information you have available. You have all the information I can give you right now.
No, I mean 60 days to make a decision.
Oh, no, you have to make a decision today. The president needs to act. Yeah. Normally I'd let you go home and ponder it and pray, but today I need an answer. The president wants an answer. The president asks you to make a decision on A, because these are actually the 3. By the way, all of these are real choices that were presented to Truman. I'm not making this stuff up.
This stuff is real.
This is real. He was given 3 choices initially. No, well, we don't have. We're going back in time. We don't know what he's going to do. Remember, it's 1948. I'll let you know what he did do. But for now, time machine.
Yeah.
You have to ask, what is the right thing to do? Let 2.6 million people freeze and starve to death?
Or lift the blockade.
Or break the blockade? And again, we do not have sufficient military force to do that.
Could conventional means mean diplomacy as well? Or-
Yes, yeah, diplomacy is conventional means could be diplomacy. Yep. Very good. That's why we do it in groups.
Well, it's just a group decision.
Well, it'll be, we'll vote, once you vote, we're gonna tally the vote and the majority wins. That's what the president's gonna do. So we'll count the ballots after. We'll hand them over to Bonnie and Doug. All right, you've decided on ballot number 1? All right, issue number 2, here we go. We're not done yet. Oh, vote. The president now needs your help with his second decision. This second decision is the rise of the Soviet power in the West and the possibility of the Soviets getting the atomic bomb. Currently, they do not. We are the only nation on Earth with atomic weapons. But the Soviets are increasing their expansion around the world. We are concerned about communist domination of the globe. As you know, militarily, we are outnumbered 10 to 15 to 1 within Eastern Europe. We do not stand a chance of winning a conventional war in Europe right now. Okay? The Soviets continue to expand into Europe. They've taken over Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania. They're making moves on Greece and the southern part into the Baltic because they want the Black Sea for an open port. They are threatening liberty into Asia as well. They have, of course, the Chinese are in China, and the communists are threatening Vietnam and Korea. They pose a genuine threat to democracy and the liberty of Europe. They outnumber us 10 to 1, and in a sense have unlimited troops available. Every unit we move has to move by ship across the Atlantic. The Soviets have no atomic weapons, but agencies tell us that they are developing atomic weapons. We estimate the timeline between 5 and 20 years before they get atomic weapons. So we have a buffer, or at least we think we do. We currently have 50, we're bumping ahead a year ahead. We currently have 50 atomic weapons, and our current plan is by the next year to have 200. To be able to bomb 200 Soviet cities will be subject to simultaneous atomic bombardment. So we think by next year we can wipe out 200 Soviet cities at once. Now we can only do 50. But here's our problem. Doug.
If the Soviets develop an atomic weapon of their own, if it became accessible to several nations, war with all its destructive consequences would be inevitable. In order to avoid what is needed is a monopoly on the atomic bomb. Such a monopoly would become possible by establishing a global empire. It was built by the Soviet Union, then a totalitarian order will emerge. If, however, the United States ends up heading the empire, then it will be about the triumph of democracy.
So this year, 1947, James Burnham has addressed the president in an official document called The Struggle for the World, and he is suggesting that there are two outcomes within the next year or two. That the Soviets will expand and thereby create a Soviet monopoly upon the world, or we can choose to expand and have a democratic monopoly on the world. You have to decide whose monopoly will control the world. Will it be communism or will it be democracy? Our actions today will determine the direction of the globe. And again, this is all real things that were being said. Mr. Burnham continues. Bonnie.
If the Soviet Union obtains atomic weapons, it will deploy them and win victory. If the United States, however, would stop its foot-raging and inflict preemptive atomic strikes, victory would be theirs. Let us suppose that when the war begins, the Soviet Union does not yet have atomic weapons. Then, of course, there will be no immediate retaliation to the initial mass atomic attack by the United States. This means that the first stage of the war will be a gigantic victory for the United States.
There are members of Congress and members within the military right now and members within the civilian population that are calling us this year to strike first. to send the planes and bomb 200 Soviet cities, thereby ensuring the retreat of Soviet expansion around the globe and the expansion of democracy around the globe. We have to strike first. Mr. Burnham continues in his address to the president. Donna.
The reality is that the only alternative to the communist world empire is an American empire, which will be, if not literally worldwide in formal boundaries, capable of exercising decisive world control.
We as Americans must exercise world domination. We must control the world, creating democracy for all peoples. It's a pretty bold statement, isn't it? So here's your vote. You have three choices. First one is America first, and Jack caught me already. Defend our shores by any and all means available, and let the Soviets do what they, not them, what they want with the rest of the world. So the first choice could be what we did during the 1920s. After World War I, we chose not to engage in global affairs. America first, let the Soviets take over the world, but don't even come close to New York or LA or Honolulu. Option 2 is called containment. That is, become the arsenal of freedom and contain all the Soviet aggression by selling, leasing, or giving any and all allies or enemies of the Soviets conventional weapons, tanks, airplanes, guns, that kind of thing. We will create the world's largest weapons industry, and we will give, whether it's the Israelis, the British, the French, the Vietnamese, the Koreans, the Japanese, the Sudanese, anybody who wants it, South America, all the guns you want. Or B, in addition to all the guns you want, we will send our troops to help you. We will send American troops to Germany, Korea, and Vietnam to stop Soviet expansion. Or C, first strike. We must strike the Soviets first with our atomic arsenal. This is the choice they had to make. Go. I will tell you what they chose.
History kind of told us what they chose.
Yeah, just let us go. Obviously, C did not happen. But C was on the table as a serious option.
You should have sent an email with a threat.
We have currently threatened the Soviets prior to 1947 4 times with atomic bombs. And they have called our bluff. It was called Berlin. The blockade was the Soviets calling the American bluff. Either use it or shut up. So, have you voted? Okay. Bonnie and Doug, you made the decision for the world? I like it. All right. Situation number 3. This is the one that gets a lot of generals very excited. Further development of our atomic power. All right. Should we, because we have an opportunity here to have the biggest stick. Currently we only have anywhere between 50 and 200 A bombs. They're nothing. We would like to develop and expand our atomic arsenal. Here is our current problem. We only have 200 Thin Man and Fat Boy bombs, the ones we dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Thin Man is about 5.2 meters long. It's designed to use plutonium. It's the equivalent of 220 B-29s. We could launch 220. During the war, we launched 1,000 plane raids over Japan, Italy, and Germany. So 220 is not a problem. We can do that on a weekend. It's the equivalent of 220 B-29s carrying 1,200 tons of incendiary bombs, 400 tons of high explosive bombs, and 500 tons of anti-personnel. So we could launch 220 bombers over a city. We're good at that. And currently, the bombs we have, the Thin Man, is only capable of destroying 5 square miles of a city, which is the equivalent of conventional weaponry. It releases about 15 kilotons of energy, the equivalent of 15,000 tons of TNT. It's not a very big bomb. We also have the Fat Man, which is a little more capable. It produces about 21 kilotons. It's about 40% more powerful, but we don't have a lot of these. Just to put them in perspective, that's how big they are. So the first one, the big long green one, that's the equivalent of 15,000 tons of TNT. But we don't feel that's sufficient. We would like to develop something new. Now, just to put it in perspective, I've selected a small town in southwest Saskatchewan as an illustration of what a thin man bomb can do. The middle circle here is, you can kind of see where the junctions are. The middle circle is the fireball. That's complete devastation. And then we radiate outward. And
Yeah, that's where I farm.
I appreciate the application here. So that first one, the fireball of a thin man bomb is only 0.1 square kilometers. The heavy blast damage at 20 psi is only 340 meters. The radiation is about 4.5 kilometers, 500 rems of ionizing radiation, which is fatal in about a month. They'll only die a month later. The moderate blast damage at 5 psi goes out to about 1.5 kilometers from the center of the blast. The thermal radiation, which produces third-degree burns, is only 1.9 kilometers, and light blast damage, about 1 psi. It'll, glass windows will break, but that's only really about 4.5 kilometers away. So the thin man is not a very effective weapon. You buy that? No. We'd like to do a lot more. This is what the fat man can do, same things, fireball, thermal detonation, and onwards. We're getting there. It's 20% stronger than the thin man bomb. And again, I won't read them all, but the fireball is about 200 meters across, and light blast damage is now about 66 square kilometers. So it's not bad. We would like to develop, however, something much better. We would like to develop the hydrogen bomb, the thermonuclear weapon. We're calling this Project Ivy Mike, and it's that big. Now, our plan for Ivy Mike is very simple. It will use an A-bomb as a detonator. Puts that in perspective. The temperature of the center of the sun currently is 15.7 million Kelvin. Our bomb is 350 million Kelvin. The equivalent TNT of our plan is 22,928,075,267.23 pounds of TNT in the bomb you just saw in the picture, or 10.4 megatons. Now, just to put that in perspective, between 1939 and 1945, we dropped 6.8 billion pounds of TNT on the world. Our bomb is 22. We'd like to develop a lot of these, with your permission. Ivy Mike will do this. Just to put it, that yellow center is the blast. Murray, I think it's hitting your farm. So the fireball is now 32 kilometers in radius. A fireball 32 kilometers across. Radiation, again, now is at 36 kilometers blast damage and on light blast damage. And our third-degree burns will extend 2,670 square kilometers. So we're working on this. Third-degree burns. By the way, we're looking at 100% probability of third-degree burns in that blast radius. Just for a little historical perspective, we'll get out of our time machine and go back to 2021. The Soviets developed the Tsar bomb, which was 50 megatons in application, 100 megatons in design. It's that big. Put that in perspective, if we drop the Tsar bomb at 50 megatons, that's what it would wipe out. If you dropped the 100 megaton bomb, everything would be destroyed within that range. So we'd like to drop that on, the Soviets built that, and they actually dropped it. They dropped a 50 megaton weapon.
Where did they do that?
In the Arctic. So to help you out a little bit, this is the mushroom cloud from Hiroshima, this is Nagasaki, this is Mount Everest, this is 1 megaton, this is 15 megaton, this is 50 megatons. And 1961 they deployed it. Now, just to help you out, in 1883, Krakatoa, the volcano exploded. This red blast is the Tsar bomb. That's Krakatoa. It was the largest sound ever produced on Earth. And it traveled, the sound wave, the shock wave from Krakatoa traveled around the globe 7 times before it ran out of energy. It actually darkened the Earth. There's a whole story of Krakatoa. But, so even the Tsar bomb is nothing compared to nature. But we'd like to bring a little piece of the sun down to Earth. So here's back to our story. Our estimated goals are this. that while we currently have 200 old-style A-bombs, by 1955, we would like to have 2,422 H-bombs, the thermonuclear ones we're talking about, the big Mike. And our estimate is that by 1965, we'll have 31,149 atomic weapons of various sizes. This is our goals. And just to put it in perspective, they achieved those goals. Those are real numbers.
That's why we haven't had the war since.
So why do we want to develop bigger bombs? Why do we need the H-bomb, folks? Let me tell you on this. Because the only way to peace is through atomic energy. We need this bomb because we got to have the biggest gun on the block. You can't let the neighbor have a bigger gun than you, right? And if the Soviets develop atomic weapons, we need thermonuclear weapons. We got to outgun them, right? Because energy is peace. Here's our current limitation. We have some problems with our current situation. Joyce.
Limitations. Preparation for the bomb requires about 40 to 50 men and took between 56 and 72 hours. Depending on the skill of the bomb assembly team and the Armed Forces Special Weapons Project has only 3 teams as of June 1948. The only aircraft capable of carrying the bomb were Silver Plate B-29s, and the only group equipped with them is the 509th Bombardment Group at Walker Air Force Base in Roswell, New Mexico.
Roswell.
Sorry. They would first have to fly to Sandia Base to collect the bombs, and then to an overseas base from which a strike could be mounted.
So our problem is that if the Soviet tanks decide to roll into Eastern Europe and destroy the peace-loving people of Western Europe, we can't get there fast enough. It's too slow. We want atomic bombs in Europe, or at the very least in Britain. Or Turkey would be really nice. Then we can launch within 56 hours. We could delay them for 2 days, and then within less. But our hydrogen bombs are much quicker applied. And we need better planes. So, Winston Churchill has proposed this. Where are we up to? Oh, back to Dan, or did we do this before? I don't know where we're at.
Oh,
Okay.
Operation Unthinkable to impose upon Russia the will of the United States and the British Empire. The British Armed Forces Joint Planning Staff underscored that the Allied forces would win in the event of the occupation of such metropolitan areas of Russia, so that the war-making capacity of the country would be reduced to a point to which further resistance would become impossible. And 2, such a decisive defeat of the Russian forces in the field as to render it impossible for the USSR to continue the war.
Prime Minister Churchill proposed the only way to achieve those goals is through the use of large-scale atomic weapons. He's not alone. We've developed a plan called Operation Deadshot. Donna.
Operation Drop Shot.
Sorry, Drop Shot, yeah. It should be Deadshot.
It should be Deadshot?
No, it is Drop Shot.
Okay, Drop Shot. The U.S. will attack Soviet Russia and drop at least 300 nuclear bombs and 20,000 tons of conventional bombs on 200 targets in 100 urban areas, including Moscow and Leningrad. In addition, this will kick off a major land campaign against the USSR to win complete victory over the Soviet Union together with the European allies. What is that word? According to the plan, Washington will start the war on January 1st, 1957.
So, with the aid of our British allies, Winston Churchill has proposed a plan called Operation Unthinkable. Our name for it is Operation Drop Shot. We're ready to do this. Our goal is this, and we think by January 1st, 1957, 10 years from now, we will have sufficient nuclear and thermonuclear bombs to enact Operation Drop Shot. We need your permission, however, to develop thermonuclear weapons. So, do we just keep what we have? We got 5 bombs or 200, whatever the number is good, and we will only build more A bombs. You're going to give us permission to build more atomic bombs, or do we have your permission to develop the H bomb, but only up to our current number of 200? Or can we build as many as we want, as big as we want, or destroy all our current atomic weapons and never build another one?
It's still bottom line, I never really studied.
Can I come too, Myrtle?
The sad part of this is those were the decisions laid before Truman. Operation Drop Shot, Operation Unthinkable, the development. He could have said no to the thermonuclear weapons. These are the real issues that were placed before him. Every one of these scenarios that I'm giving you is genuine. All right. Jordy, if you wouldn't, in 1948, C.S. Lewis wrote this.
In one way, we think a great deal too much of the atomic bomb. How are we to live in an atomic age? I am tempted to reply, why, as you would have lived in the 16th century when the plague visited London almost every year, or as you would have lived in a Viking age when raiders from Scandinavia might land and cut your throat any night, or indeed as you are already living in an age of cancer, an age of syphilis, an age of paralysis, an age of air raids, an age of railway accidents, and an age of motor accidents.
C.S. Lewis asked the questions, how do we as godly, ethical people live in this age, the age of atomic threat? And Lewis says, well, it's like any other age. Apply what you knew. You know, we've always lived in peril, he continues. You up for it, Jordy?
Yeah.
Good.
In other words, do not let us begin by exaggerating the novelty of our situation. Believe me, dear sir or madame, you and all whom you love are already sentenced to death before the atomic bomb was invented. And quite a high percentage of us were going to die in unpleasant ways. We had, indeed, one very great advantage over our ancestors, anesthetics. But we have that still. It is perfectly ridiculous to go out whimpering and drawing long faces because the scientists have added one more chance of painful and premature death to a world which already bristled with such chances, and in which death itself was not a chance at all, but a certainty.
Last one, you're doing great.
This is the first point to be made, and the first action to be taken is to pull ourselves together. If we are all going to be destroyed by an atomic bomb, let that bomb, when it comes, find us doing sensible and human things. Praying, working, teaching, reading, listening to music, bathing the children, playing tennis, chatting to our friends over a pint and game of darts, not huddled together like frightened sheep and thinking about bombs. They may break our bodies, a microbe can do that, but they need not dominate our minds.
C.S. Lewis was the voice of reason in the atomic age. People were terrified, and we can't appreciate the terror they experienced. The fact that a group of sane individuals would say, we need to build bigger weapons, thermonuclear weapons that are literally 10 times as hot as the center of the sun, and we need to drop them on citizens in 10 years. That's the plan. Lewis came along and said, let's rethink, calm down, breathe. And the Christian church embraced the atomic age. This is from a book called When God Splits the Atom. Here we see atomic bomb and the end of the world. Atomic power with God, the fasting and prayer. So fasting and prayer are the atomic power of God, you know. Opening the door of, you know, these things are the equivalent. That's 1946, by the way. But the Americans viewed, and the American political structure, viewed the atomic bomb as a gift from God. Harry S. Truman, in August 9, 1945, the Potsdam Conference was the conference about a post-war. And Truman came back, and it's quite long, but this is his comment on the atomic weapon. It is an awful responsibility which has come to us. We thank God it has come to us instead of our enemies, and we pray that he may guide us to use it in his ways and for his purpose. Truman had every intention of using the atomic bomb for God's glory. So, hand your votes in. I will hand them to Bonnie and Doug. You can tally them, and then I'll tell you first. I'll tell you when we do that. Oh,
My answers were more complicated than just.
I just want to simplify.